So I finished Nice to Meet You again. It's alright. It's more than alright, but I'm not really a fan of the name of the title. I'd prefer it to be called like Nando or Nandome or instead of like that whole thing. It's mainly that it's weird to say all of that if you want to recommend it to somebody because it kind of sounds like one of those like light novel titles. It's like, hey, it's not catchy enough, so no one cares that it's super vague, nor is it specific enough. The time travel looping title, but with that kind of title, you can also consider like, oh, it's one of those like ones where they have amnesia, or if you have some trauma-induced event, which it'd be pretty cool in a different plot. It could even be something like, oh, the 51st Dates, the kind of movie with like Adam Sandler from like I guess 20 years ago at this point, I don't know. Anyway, title tangent aside, Nandome ends up being a time loop title. The main character, Yumeto, is a dude that's 30 and bored of life because his job's pretty much ass. It's more that he's just a normal salaryman and he's like another cog in the wheel shit, but the dude doesn't really do anything outside of like after a shift is done, right? It's like he doesn't do shit. His mom sends some shit to sell off and finds this bracelet that ends up connecting him to this being called Laplace. He shapeshifts to a cat for convenience. At first I thought the plot stuff was like, oh, it's a nod to alchemy and Lapis and shit like that, and it's foreshadowing stuff that'll show up later in the plot. And the alchemy thing is one of the focal points later down the line, but there's times where they just go up on just like, oh, let's talk about math. Where Yumeto keeps going on about he doesn't remember any of this like trigonometry shit. And he's like, oh, I never use this thing in my next 13 years of life. Like, what? This was useless. And eventually it talked about the functions again using times. So Laplace is probably about the Laplace time shift. I hated all of this differential equation shit when I had to do it in class a long ass time ago. And I guess what? I never used any of that crap either. I have no idea why I was forced to take those classes for my major. I'm not an engineer. I remember one stupid equation that took like 3 pages to solve. I think it was like Euler's equation or something. Maybe it was a proof. I don't remember. I do remember other people from my major were looking at this shit like, why are we doing this? And we just all laughed and like, this is so absurd. What the fuck? Anyway, you don't really need to know any of that to enjoy the VN. It's more of a nod to say like, oh, Laplace is converting Yumeto's problem into a more easily like solvable problem. And it's the general course of the title where Yumeto gets more defined variables to solve the problem, right? Like the Bluebird fairy tale is either way more integral to Arito, it's like the name of the title, right? Or just easier to link up what it's going for compared to like Laplace is for like Nandome, right? Like you still get it, but it doesn't make the title better for knowing it. So back to the plot, in turn of learning everything about Yumeto and how he works, Lapla, which is Laplace, but they call it Lapla, right? Gives him a week back in time where he was the happiest, or rather it's back in time when he was like the least bored, because that's like what's ailing him currently. So they agree, or rather Laplace just goes with it because Yumeto keeps asking for clarifications, and then the bracelet stabs his wrist and takes some blood. Now he's like, what the fuck is this shit? And now he's being sent back into the past for a week, right? And from what I remember, he doesn't believe it's the past, but that he's reliving his memories of the time without like anything being muddled. Except now there's this girl he doesn't remember anything about, and he thinks like, oh, this is like a freebie Laplace put in here. She's called Sue, it's the main character, or the main female lead. Skipping a big chunk, he falls for her, and then out of nowhere, nobody knows who she is anymore, and he's freaking out, and then gets transported back to his current time and asks what Laplace was trying to do with that. And he doesn't know what he's talking about. Look, and then he looks into it, and it's like, yeah, she actually existed, and then she just poofed. So the rest of the title is going back to the past and trying to figure out why that was happening, how to solve it, and each time he goes back, more blood has to be consumed. The problem with Yumeto is that he's in a dire situation. He knows he has a limited amount of tries to solve everything, but at the same time he fucks around a lot. Not in the sense like, oh, I'm gonna play video games all day today, but a lot of times he's just spending time with Sui and not doing anything. Like, oh, I'm just hanging out with Sui. It's like, you got shit to do. And it goes back and forth with the idea that he's an adult and his mindset's different from Yumeto at the time, to then him acting like he has a mindset of a younger self type thing and being like more prideful about mundane shit, and he should have just skipped over to get results faster. Like, no, I'm too prideful, I can't ask her. Just fucking ask her. You'll solve so much shit. Now, like, a lot of shit dropped at his feet by the last loop. With the pace he was going at, the dude would have died before getting anywhere. Like, there could have been a loop where he'd ask everybody he knows and get the differences between when Sui exists and when she doesn't, but it's always like, oh shit, this person knows something and I assumed they wouldn't. Why didn't I ask before? Like, this happens multiple times. I get that's the part of the plot. A lot of these time loop like type plots would be a lot shorter if none of them were idiots. And I went back and forth with like making him a little bit younger, like maybe 25, and making it work. But then other parts near the end would feel less impactful anyways. Like, it's hard to do. It's more of a writing thing. The famous time loop one would be like Steins Gate, where you know how it's going to end up like way before, like in the first 10 hours or so, and you're just reading a massive chunk of time where Okabe is trying to figure out what's going on and just failing and just repeat, right? Even if Tempest is a title you want, if you want someone that's not fucking around, it's also one of my favorites, even though I didn't give it a high of a score. It's actually around like the same as this Nandome one. It's for specific reasons on like, I'm trying to be more objective on it because on a personal bias, I'd probably put Tempest at like a low 9. And it's like, there's a lot of things why I wouldn't put it there, but for my enjoyment, it would be like a 9. Nandome is a little different than the other purplesoft titles that are over here. It's a bit shorter with it being a kinetic novel, right? It's more that the true end isn't going full blast like the other titles, it's not convoluted, you can see where it's going instead of betting most of it on the true route. The quality is just consistent throughout the VN outside of like maybe a specific section where you're just getting bombarded by hscenes. Even that section of hscenes was kind of funny in the way that the loop beforehand was done so well. And I thought I was like, oh man, this could be like drip feeding hscenes and it'd be done really well. And then it told you no and shoved like 3 hscenes and then another 3 hscenes soon after. It's like, holy crap, now I'm drowning. I think there's 2 sections where you can pick a choice and at least a different hscenes, but there's an obviously better choice. Like one was so dumb that I don't know why it was even made. Just take that choice away. Holy crap, it was so bad. Like the obviously better one is still worse quality than the rest. Like if you look at the hscene list in the game, I could say that it's only maybe like scene 2, 7, 13, and technically 10, but that's just to enforce a plot point. Taking that out and like scene 10 through 12 are also pretty fucking dumb. The best scene is one that's not even counted as an hscene because it's just them making out. It's like, this was a great scene. Outside of the opening and ending tracks, most of all the tracks are more there for like atmosphere. Search for Keys is a really cool track, but the one that stands out is Best of Days, and that's only because the start of it reminds me of like a higher BPM version of a track from a Symphonic Rain, which is like, I hate that character, but also that's what makes her work. I could put like a thing right here. The art is still good, she's thick, but they're pushing pretty hard at this point. It's like, damn, she could never be drowning with that much, right? They handled lighting really well for the most part. There's times where it feels like either the classroom needs new lights or the sun is glaring at them, but otherwise, a lot of the lighting is great. Overall, I'm giving it like a high 7. I assume most people give it an 8. I don't think the finale is that impactful compared to some of the other like purplesoft titles where it bumps the usual score up a bit. I think the amount of hscenes lowered a little bit for me. A lot of them weren't needed and added a little to the padding. It was to the point that I think this took me maybe 4 days longer than normal because I would just save and go do something else because I wasn't in the mood to read more fucking hscenes. I could say some other parts are padded, but it's the usual bit on most movies and novels where if you set the actions too realistically, it'd be over too fast. And it's nowhere near as bad as a lot of other things where you can spend like 30 episodes on the whole season or whatever and they're still not dating. It's like, holy shit, get on with it. This is awful. I think the first 2 loops were when the title shined the most. The last loop felt bogged down by too many reveals that should have been sprinkled down more evenly. Sure, the highest hype moments were near the end, but that's the usual. Parts of it were kind of laughable, like, yeah, I guess what you're going for actually works considering what Laplace is. There were times where I could see the possibility of going for like a few wilder paths, but considering I saw the initial average was like 10 hours, I doubt they could ever go for it. I think it raised to like 15 at this point. There's a couple of bad endings that are needed for the true route where it's like, some of them weren't needed. I don't know why they were necessary. Not in like, oh, these were bad. Like, I don't see the point of why these were needed to get the true route anyway, right? I think the last bad end was like pretty cool, and if the title was a little longer, it could have been used to retroactively add some spice for the first loop, but they weren't going for it. Mainly, I feel like Yumeto was meandering too much at certain points, but at the same time, it could have been an extra loop to space them all better, while also making some of the bad endings actually part of the loops and giving them like some more background info instead of him just stumbling onto them. It's like, alright, another thing just fell on your lap. I think Sui is rather charming. I like the idea of her changing slightly in each loop where it depends on how Yumeto interacts with her, where it's like they are the same person, but they consider themselves different from the previous ones. Really, they already have this in a different title they already made, so I'm not really giving it any extra credit for it, but still a fun trait to read about. Do things go pretty fast for them? Sure. At the same time, you can already consider they're already at the finish line and they were both just like being cowards about it. The rest of the cast has enough where they don't feel like they were just abandoned outside of maybe the school friends that you can already tell like immediately that they were going to be important anyway. Maybe a few more lines with the teacher, it would have been nice, and that's more like on my personal bias. A bit more with the family members. Like there's a couple where it's like they should maybe have more lines, but it's like, yeah, I get why they're not around all the time. He's only focusing on Sui, he says so himself, that's the point. I'll be doing a few tier lists. The first one is more of an overall. It considers all the routes and how a few of those routes push the title down. Like for Aoitori, Sayo was great and the parts of the true route were pretty sweet, but holy shit, is Risa's route really bad. The whole title was going crazy with hscenes too, and that also pissed me off a bit. It even joked on itself because there's like a harem section in the extra route. There's like a harem route which is like 2 hours long or just complete hscenes forever. Chrono Clock has a great true route, but Masaki's route was pretty much ass. And funny enough, her part in the true route was way better. I know someone that hates Dorothy, but I liked her, and someone else hated Michu, but I found she had one of the better routes in the title. Makoto was the one that felt like really dumb to me, though I know someone that actually liked her a lot. And Miu just got fucked over, she didn't have a chance. Amatsusumi has great parts that got fucked over because the main character is just boring as hell. It's more like wasted potential than anything else. Alongside most of the routes are handled in the common part or the common arc, and then their actual routes are just mainly hscenes. It's mainly like a Hotaru title, and it sucks if you don't like her. Nandome, Kokuki, and Criminal Border are around like the more consistent ones. If I have to, Kokuki is probably the best out of the three. The best part of Happy May here is the premise, the main character, and like Maya. I liked Yayoi, or however you pronounce her name, but the other routes were really like kind of whatever. I think Saki was fine, but also I don't remember a lot of it. Happy Mayor probably has like the weakest true route as well. The next tier list is based on its hype or its impact moments. Really, it's probably the more conflicting one. Like I can move things around. Kokuki's at the top, the other two at the top, and Amatsusumi are all around the same. Like Amatsusumi should be higher than Chrono Clock, but Chrono Clock's true route segment is massive, while Amatsumi's is mainly multiple scenes and Hotaru. Like really, I'd put all the four of them on top. Just if I had to kick one out, it'd be Amatsusumi. And a decent chunk of that, it really is that the main character is pretty boring in comparison to everybody else, or rather every other main character. Happy Maker had an amazing scene near the end, and I remember a couple of cool scenes in Yayoi's and Saki, whilst I don't remember anything for like Keiko's route. I remember liking it, but also nothing was happening. If anything would have to drop, it'd be Aoitori. Like, Criminal Border's a lot more down to earth. The moments are great, but it wasn't really written to be full of like, holy shit moments. It's like, you know what's going on, it's written well, and that's it. And it's like, even then, I think it's like chapter 3, there are moments like, hey, this was good, but it's just a lot less than the other ones. This one's on the premise, and then how well I think they used it. Also kind of conflicting. Like Chrono Clock is going that high solely because it used the premise and went way further with it by the end. Because otherwise the premise is really lame. It's like, all right, you go back 5 minutes, wow. And you know, he uses the practical uses of it, but then out of nowhere, like you're talking about time gods, like holy shit. Otherwise, yeah, it's lowered. Criminal Board is really consistent with what it's about, and like I said before, Happy Mirror's best part is the premise, and it was done well. It's just the routes kind of suck. And the last one is my personal bias. Most of the purplesoft is around a 7 or 8 in my scores, but personally they're high for specific moments or just like a specific character. A lot of things could be higher. It's like, hey, I like this a lot, but based on every other title I've read, it's like, yeah, it can't go higher than an 8. And these are all the characters. Things would have been moved around, like Rei, Rin, and the Kokoki twins could be raised. The Alice's main fault is more that she's the true route lead and it didn't land. But the character itself is fine. Lapla, Kokoto, Miyu, and Keiko could be lowered as well. I like them, but it's like Keiko didn't do much. So that's done. Spoiler section now. It's going to be pretty short. Early on, Yumeto visits the hospital and sees the old dude freaking out. Of course, we can see that the guy looks like an older version of himself. And if you didn't see the average reading time of it was like 10 hours at the time, right? Things could have been different, and you could like, oh, you could have different ideas on it. But with it being so short, it can be nothing then is that. But on the other hand, having multiple nested time loops happening would have been like really fun for me to read about. So you can have Yumeto's like POV that you're looking at, and then there could have been the dad freaking out by the time limit, but also different Yumeto or dad trying to circumvent some kind of bullshit that the current players will ultimately do. So it becomes like a B plot of extra cast in the like its own little rat race. It could have been continued on where Yumito's mom was also in on it, or that even Sui's in on it in like a different loop where she comes back again to do other changes. It's like, what if Sui always knew? And the funny thing is that's also a plot point in a different title they have. So I was like, they could use it again, I guess. And that's about it. The scheduling or whatever is going to be different again. For like this time, I think I had like 3 videos in a month or something. I'm not doing that anymore. I think it was specifically, well, these are all short titles. I pushed them all out. Have a lot of Tomei titles to push out as well, and you know, I have to edit them and all that shit. But the thing is, Probably gonna be like every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks kind of thing, like I used to. A lot of things, the 2 new titles I'm reading is also like 30 to 40 hours long now instead of these 10-hour ones. So of course that also takes longer. Senmomo might be the 1 and 2 months, who knows? But that's about it.